these people, not all, mind you, there's good black people as well as good white people. I've always talked to that. But some, mind you, live to set traps for rich white women.
I'm not a rich white woman.
I know that, dear. I didn't mean that. You know I didn't mean that. It's just, oh God, didn't we all go together to see guess who's coming to dinner?
Yeah.
It's just, Elga, you have to realize all Negroes are not like that.
Well, you sound like a segregationist. I think you have a castration complex that leads you to say things
You
like
have a
that.
castration complex. I can't have a castration complex. It isn't physically possible.
Oh, let's
for me
face it,
to have
Mother.
it.
Castration complex is one of the crosses a liberated female must bear.
Oh, you think I'm liberated?
Joyce, you are a liberated, aggressive, butch American broad.
A modern day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Layer Kick, a Coen brothers stand up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel, Alvin and the Chipmunks deserving of the squeak. There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Let's take the L. This phrase could have a couple of different meanings. If it were uttered by an athlete, it could mean that they accept defeat, owning their loss. However, if it were said by an athlete in Chicago, things could get confusing, as they may also be referring to riding the elevated train, commonly known as the L. This train line, which has been running since 1892, has gone through many changes. At first, it ran only a few wooden coaches pulled by steam locomotives. Over the years, service was extended to more locations, eventually using electric traction motors demonstrated years earlier at Chicago's 1890 World's Fair. Control over the operation of the L changed hands time after time until the Chicago Transit Authority took control in the 1940s and advanced the service over time, introducing skip-stop service, air-conditioned cars, and expanding service to over 220 miles of track. The nickname the L dates back even further than the L's existence, when newspapers in the 1880s used the term to refer to the proposed tracks, also calling them the Alley Elevated or Alley L. Train enthusiasts have long admired the L train for its historical significance and ingenuity, but another group that is known to admire the structure is entertainment industry location scouts. The L has been featured in dozens of television shows and movies, typically in more exciting scenes. In The Fugitive, Dr. Richard Kimball faced off against the one-armed man aboard the L train. In Risky Business, Tom Cruise and Rebecca De Mornay felt it in the air tonight aboard the now-defunct Lake Dan Ryan line. And in 2004, several sections of the L were used in place of New York City subway cars in Spider-Man 2, famously nearly running off the elevated track had it not been for the web-slinger's cavalier actions to keep it from careening into the river. Spider-Man 2, directed by Sam Raimi, is frequently cited as one of the best superhero films, thanks in part to its Oscar-winning visual effects, brilliant stunt work, and memorable performances from Alfred Molina, James Franco, and star Tobey Maguire. California native Maguire has had his fair share of iconic performances. We all remember him as James Lear in Wonder Boys, Nick Carraway in The Great Gatsby, and Ian in the Pussy Posse's showcase film Don's Plum, featuring Maguire, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Kevin Connolly. However, inaugural Pussy Posse member Lucas Haas was oddly absent from the cast list. But not all of Maguire's projects have been as high profile. He made his on-screen debut in 1989's Fred Savage Jenny Lewis Nintendo adventure Wizard. He played Unnamed Boy in a 1990 episode of Blossom, and 34 years later he would star in a bizarre miniseries written by Matt Piedmont and Harper Steele called The Spoils of Babylon for the IFC channel. The series also featured performances from Kristen Wiig, Tim Robbins, Val Kilmer, Haley Joel Osment, and Will Ferrell. Ferrell also acted as executive producer, along with Piedmont, Steele, Nate Young, and Will Ferrell's Gary Sanchez partner, Adam McKay. Ferrell and McKay are also the team behind the Spoils of Babylon production company and comedy website Funny or Die, a platform for short-form videos known for underpaying its creatives and also for naming yours truly the Twitter Comedian of the Week sometime around 2012. But when Funny or Die launched in 2007, it debuted a video that featured Ferrell verbally sparring with Pearl, played by McKay's own daughter, and a sketch about an irate landlord and her delinquent tenant who owes her back rent. But this sketch, titled The Landlord, bears no connection, aside from its name, to this week's film. Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods, and on this episode, we're talking about Hal Ashby's 1970 directorial debut, a social satire in which Elgar Enders, a wealthy white man, buys a tenement building in ungentrified Brooklyn with the goal of booting the black tenants and using the building as his inner-city mini-mansion. Will Elgar succeed and create his urban oasis, or will the charismatic tenants get the best of him, forcing him to take the L? Dan, you used to live in Brooklyn. How did your experience compare to Elgar's?
Oh, well, I lived in the Brooklyn of 2014.
You sure did.
So after all of the Elgars came in, and I don't think any of the other Elgars went down the same route he did. So they went down the route that they were planning. So I lived in Park Slope, so the same neighborhood.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Not incredibly far. I mean, he lived on...
It was 51 Prospect Place.
Yeah. So I lived not far from... I looked up the address. I think it's closer to where, like, the Brooklyn Art Museum is.
It's kind of near there. It's near, like, the Barclays Center.
Yeah. So not close to not that close to where I lived in Park Slope. But still... Park Slope is a neighborhood that, as is foretold and foreseen in The Landlord, goes under, tremendous gentrification. It's one of those, I think about most of Brooklyn and a lot of New York, and as kind of spreading further out, but also Jersey City and even Hoboken, these areas that have become so trendy among young professionals, and were definitely once more not high income housing. You weren't how much does he pay for the building?
I don't remember if it said how much he paid for the building.
Right. Yeah, I don't recall, but that building now, like, maybe like we need to look up how much that building, like...
I already have,
yes.
Dan.
Okay, splendid. I was kind of hoping you'd had.
So the only information that I have about it is that the building sold in 1986 for $304,000.
Oh,
so that adjusted for inflation these days would only be $875,000.
Oh no,
Yeah.
That building at that address. Oh,
forget it.
Millions.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't know. Am I undershooting if I say 5 million?
Oh no, I don't think so.
No,
it's a 3-story building.
Am I over? But I'm not overshooting.
You're undershooting for sure.
I'm undershooting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and also it's like 304,000. That was 1986. So that's 16 years after The Landlord. So it's theoretically, I would say maybe $200,000 in 1970.
Yeah.
Which still, it seems like a complete bargain, even when you adjust for inflation for what you're getting. I mean, that said, The Landlord takes place in 1970 or maybe even 1969 Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And like we said, it's completely ungentrified. This movie is kind of prophesizing what is to eventually happen to the neighborhood. Sorry, my dogs are going bananas right now. So there's a lot of tippy tappies on the floor, some tap dancing from the dogs. So the Brooklyn that we see, it's definitely in the world of the movie gentrifying probably earlier than it actually did in reality.
Yeah.
It definitely foresaw the future. We could see there's the really great scene where Elgar goes to another building that had been bought out by a wealthy new white owner who is talking about like, oh, this is great because we're getting some like like good high class people coming into the neighborhood, and it's so dismissive, and it's such a it's something that you always have to remember about this movie is that. And this, we didn't know this about Hal Ashby at the time. I say this as if I was around in 1970 going to the movies, but no, you didn't know Hal Ashby as a director yet. This is his first one out. The only thing that we've talked about him as a director before, but he edited In the Heat of the Night,
right?
And so clearly he has some connection with movies that have a social justice message.
Oh,
I know that he was very close with Norman Jewison, and it was certainly in his character to want to make movies about these important causes and class differences, which as we saw as we see his career take him to, I mean, Harold and Maude and Being There are two great examples of like what class does for somebody, and
he
the
loves
way that they see it. He really did, and he made movies that didn't do this, but I feel like the work that we associate him most with, it's kind of like, after the fact that we're like, oh right, he did Coming Home and Bound for Glory. Was that the I never saw that one.
Woody Guthrie. No, it's really hard to find. It's never streaming anywhere.
Speaking of Woody Guthrie, I just watched A Complete Unknown.
Which
features Scoot McNairy as Woody Guthrie.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. That's definitely on my list of things to see.
This is spoiling nothing about it because this is all something that you would know from the trailer or any press photos. But all I have to say is, look out, Maestro. There's a new Junos movie in town.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of hard to ignore. It's not as prominent and distracting as Bradley Cooper's in Maestro. And I think that Timothée Chalamet is maybe half Jewish, so it kind of gives a little bit of leeway there.
Yeah, and with Bradley Cooper, I was like, the voice didn't help either. With Maestro. So okay, all right. So but it doesn't sound like a big deal, but also buyer beware.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm that's fine. I will withhold judgment until I see the film, but I'm definitely interested in seeing it, and the question is that have and I feel like the answer is probably going to be no, because
Blowing in the Wind.
No.
The answer is Blowing in the Wind.
The answer's it's blowing in the wind. It's a mighty wind. No, but just, is it possible to make a movie about the folk music era? And I'm not talking about A Mighty Wind, but I'm talking about that is, on the level of Inside Llewyn Davis.
I thought a lot about Inside Llewyn. I know we're going way off track here, but I was thinking a lot about Inside Llewyn Davis while watching A Complete Unknown, and it's like, oh, you could watch these two side by side, and it makes a really interesting story. The one thing that I thought you were going to ask me, and I wrote a little letterboxed review on this. It does say contains spoilers, but I wouldn't classify this as an actual spoiler. But for anybody who is wondering, no, we do not see him conceive Jacob Dylan. It doesn't go that far into the 60s.
Wait, hold on. Are there no nudge, nudge, wink, wink lines about like a wallflower?
We can drive it home with one headlight.
Yeah. Hey man, that's just another 6th Avenue heartache. Yeah.
How many Marlenas are there? What do we got?
Three.
1, 2. Okay, 3.
We could be heroes. Shit, why not? It was cover.
Anyway, going back to The Landlord Hal Ashby.
Yes, Hal Ashby. Definitely this. I feel like this is the type of work that, and of course, not knowing Hal Ashby either personally or having necessarily studied him as a person, he does feel like the type, even with films like Coming Home, who's looking to make a statement, but I think that who really like pushing those buttons and pointing out the the foibles of the wealthy class, and just how like having money and privilege almost permits people to behave absurdly, as we see
Well, with
throughout this movie.
Elgar's family.
Oh goodness!
But looking at some of Hal Ashby's other movies, I mean, clearly we've got being there. We see what it's like when somebody who is isolated from the outside world acts when they're around people who are members of elite society, and especially in Washington, D.C. And then in Harold and Maude, we definitely have, Harold's family is this wealthy, his mother is so out of touch with reality.
Yeah.
And when we see Harold interacting with a different world that he is unfamiliar with, it's enchanting to him, and he wants so badly to be part of it. And also in a movie like Shampoo,
Exactly. Yeah.
You have this person who is, I mean, a lower class person who enters the lives of people who are wealthier. And of course, that movie also does have like there's like this C storyline that involves like the current political state, like, what's going on in politics. I think there's an election going on.
Yeah, there's an election going on.
Which you only hear through like TV speakers throughout. It's not like a big part of it.
Well, but he goes to a party, like he goes to an election night party, and there were some actual politicians who cameoed in it.
Yeah.
But also in Shampoo, one of the things, like if I remember correctly, you meet Warren Beatty's character as he's meeting with a loan officer at a bank, applying for a loan, and where the character is exposed for being naive and not really understanding how the whole system works. And then you see him thrown into, as you said, like, thrown into this world with the, Jack Warden, who he was was he a political operative, or?
I don't really remember. We have to cover that movie at some point.
Oh,
it's so good.
I mean, yeah, wow.
I don't know. It's got a lot of competition. As we are going through the alphabet, A to Z, then Z to A, it's S has a lot of competition.
Do we at some point just like throw in a month of like those? And I'm ashamed because I'm a language arts teacher and I should know what this calls, but like where we have those like the SH and CH,
TH, like where
TH,
it creates PH.
Yeah. I don't know the I know it's not a diphthong, but
it's not a diphthong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little voice in my head that keeps saying diphthong. It's like Donnie, I'm the walrus.
Yeah, right. No,
so,
that's not it. You're out of your element, except for it's exactly your element because you are an English teacher.
My element is out of me.
But you're a high school English teacher. We're well beyond the sounds and what they're called.
And to bring it back to the Landlord, I did my student teaching in Park Slope.
Oh, did you really?
I sure did.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
Any interesting stories from then? I'm sure you've got plenty. I don't know if there's any that are relevant to the Landlord.
I mean, not really. I mean, okay, this is so short, but it was when One Direction was huge with and I was student teaching high school freshmen, and there was one girl who would not write her own last name on papers, but would write Styles.
Oh,
and
interesting.
There may have been a couple of others. There were definitely a couple of others who were on that level, but I remember this one girl who that was what the last name she wrote was Styles because that Harry Styles. That was
because
her.
Harry Styles.
Yeah, because Harry Styles. And so but it's neither here nor there, and I don't think that's necessarily indicative of Park Slope. I think that's indicative of 2012.
Sure. Yeah. Society as a whole.
Yes. So anyway, do you want me to anything else before we jump into synopsis here?
Please synopsize, Dan. We're all begging for it.
I mean, you gave it a little teaser synopsis there in the opening, which, by the way, you totally swerved me because I thought when you were like Tobey Maguire, I was like, oh, the wizard, Beau Bridges, here we go. And then it strayed.
Okay. There's
Yeah.
a lot of them that I do where I'm just like, I could go in this direction, I could go in that direction, but I felt like it was more fun to talk about that sketch video, The Landlord.
It felt like, and if it was intentional, I respect that and admire that, but it really felt like a swerve where you were like, oh, okay, and Dan's going to be like, all right, we're coming in for the landing here, but nope, it's not going to touch down. We're going back up.
I want to say, because I've already written my intro for our next episode, and I want to say that I could have taken a more direct path, but chose not to.
Well, yeah, I will see for our next one, but that's we'll talk about that later. So
We sure will.
All right, let's get down to business here. The Landlord, Elgar Enders, the black sheep of his wealthy Long Island family, buys a Brooklyn tenement building with the goal of evicting the tenants and transforming the building into a posh single-family home. After being met at the front door by a cluster of tenants and neighbors doing their best to scare him away, Elgar shocks them all by revealing his identity as their new landlord. As he approaches each tenant, he informs them of the back rent that they owe, all the while learning a bit about each one. First, he meets Marge, a fortune teller who is essentially the eyes and ears of the building. Then Elgar meets Fanny, the often alone wife of Kopi, one of the residents that tried to scare Elgar away. Fanny, on the other hand, is warm and maybe even too welcoming. The tenants in the first floor apartment are reclusive, but always seem to be watching and listening. After meeting the neighbors, entitled Elgar finds his way at a local nightclub where he meets Lainey. At first mistaking her for a white woman, Elgar soon learns that she's half black, half Irish, and he's into it, and he pursues her romantically. As it turns out, Lainey's into it too. Back in Long Island, Elgar's family, including Stoner's sister Susan, prodigal son William Jr., their openly racist father and superficial mother, is not too into his recent purchase, especially his mother, who cares way too much about appearances. But the more time Elgar spends in Brooklyn, the more involved he becomes with the fixtures in his new life, eventually moving into the first-floor apartment which was abandoned by its prior tenants. His relationship with Lainey evolves as his uptight family gets closer to accepting what they consider to be Elgar's poor financial decision. As Elgar enters, we have the aforementioned Beau Bridges.
Yeah.
As Marge, we have Pearl Bailey. As Kopi, we have Louis Gossett Jr. As Fanny, and hold on, my notes closed. Damn it.
Oh, no.
So Fanny is played by, and I of course recognized her from A Raisin in the Sun, Diana Sands,
Sure.
who played Beneatha in the film version of A Raisin in the Suns. We have Lee Grant as Mrs. Enders, Academy Award nominee for this film.
Absolutely.
Lee Grant.
Yeah, who we talked about in The Heat of the Night.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And let's see, Robert Klein as Peter, Susan Anspach as Susan Enders, Will McKenzie as William Jr.
Peter is Susan's fiance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's a total,
he's
dullard.
He's such a tool.
He's but he's rich. Comes from a rich family.
Oh yeah. He can be a tool. So and an early appearance by Hector Elizondo playing Hector.
I saw Hector Elizondo in the credits, but I don't remember his character.
I'm like, I don't know what he would have looked like in 1970 because I'm picturing like at earliest 1990.
Sure.
Like Pretty Woman Hector Elizondo.
Yeah.
So, and of course directed by Hal Ashby, written by Bill Gunn and adapting his screenplay, and Bill Gunn, who wrote, and did he also direct Ganja and Hess?
Yes.
Wrote and directed Ganja and Hess. I think that's like kind of his big, like,
Right. Yeah.
claim to fame. And which came shortly after this, and Kristen Hunter, who wrote the novel, and both African American artists.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I was like pretty much. I don't know if I was 5 minutes into the movie that I was like, all right, I gotta check this out. Who put pen to paper on this? Like,
Sure.
yeah, that makes a big difference here.
Everything checks out. And before we really go any further, I do want to give a tip of the hat to a podcast that I listen to called Michaud Mission, which is it's by these two guys, Len Webb and Vince Williams. And what they do is they watch and review this is from their description, every Black feature film ever released. And on their episode for The Landlord, they had on this guy, Marcellus Armstrong, who I don't know if he's still with Scribe Video Center in Philly, but is a Philadelphia, film world person.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really great conversation. And, a lot of the movies that they talk about usually are very much like Black directed. There are some probably more recently that I saw that they did that maybe haven't been, but what they do talk about is like, well, is this actually a Black movie? And for The Landlord, they said, yes, it is. I mean, even though Hal Ashby isn't Black, there are certainly, the script, the original source material, like it's coming from a really informed place, from an experience. And then also, like we were saying, in 1970, no one really knew Hal Ashby, aside from probably like Hollywood inside people, since he was an editor. But, knowing what he is all about and what he's always been all about, it's like he's just a progressive filmmaker who's using satire to call out social injustice.
Yeah.
That's his whole thing.
I think especially when you look back at it, from now, and you look at his career and everything like that. Yeah, absolutely. You're kind of like, I can't speak. I'm a white guy. I can't, speak on the behalf of Black people. But
right.
I would imagine, for me as an audience member who is, sensitive to just to that, and kind of it's where is the voice coming from? And why? What's the purpose? Because I don't feel like you can limit free speech to say that, like, okay, satirists are only limited to, writing satire about specific groups. But I do think that when you're going outside of your zone in your kind of like group,
mm-hmm.
you need to be cautious and considerate and think about. That's why for me the writer was more important.
And I wish that I knew a little bit more about how Hal Ashby got attached to this project. Did it have to do with his working relationship with Norman Jewison, who certainly had been creating work that was socially driven and with progressive ideologies, and perhaps it was kind of like hey, Hal Ashby should give this one a go, and perhaps it happened like that. But I wish I knew. I wish there was some source material that would give that information. But the movie itself, I mean, I feel like so much of it speaks for itself, and I feel like the way that it's framed, the style that it gives you, like especially at the beginning when it's kind of showing like Elgar, he's wearing all crisp white and pink, and he's talking very matter of fact about his plans for this tenement building, and to see his evolution and his whole persona really change as the environment, I guess, influences him, is really incredible and beautifully done. And it's like knowing what Hal Ashby, has cooked up later in his career as far as his style goes. It's just like, oh, it's all there. Like this is the prototype for so many other things to come.
Absolutely.
Like it. And also, like, Beau Bridges is fantastic. He's a cutie pa-frickin' tootie, and he is just such a perfect kind of clueless white guy who's trying to, I don't know, like prove something to his parents, but also like do something selfish, and
You know what I'm seeing in the Enders family, and especially in a lot of these attitudes. I feel like a lot of this gets reflected in Arrested Development in the Bluths.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
Like I could imagine, and it's more like Job. Like this would be Job.
A more charming version of Job.
Well, yeah, a more charming and, eventually like a less self-centered version of Job.
And let's face it, Jessica Walter could have played his mother just as well.
Oh my goodness. It would have been like, oh God, it would have been phenomenal, but also I can't watch Jessica Walters. Like I watched Play Misty for me, and I can't hear her voice without hearing the Lucille Bluth in it. So but I was like, thinking about this, and it's like, it's kind of like, what if Job Bluth had an actual like real experience or something? And it's so funny because they even like in the show almost, parody it. And I imagine that any, like satirists at that level, working at that level, are familiar with this film.
Right.
So I got that vibe from it, and I think Beau Bridges really plays that well, and it's so different. It's not like what I think about with Beau Bridges. I also don't necessarily think about young Beau Bridges.
I think that's a big part of it. I definitely am way more familiar with him as kind of the, like, I don't know, more like avuncular type or great avuncular type as it may be more recently. But, he's the guy with the big eyebrows and kind of like the sad eyes. And when he's in his like late 20s, early 30s, it's just like, oh yeah, you have this youthful vibe to you. And playing this part just seems so natural. And it makes me really appreciate Beau Bridges as an actor even more than I did. He's always been a totally adequate actor. Yeah. He gets the job done.
Yeah.
But now that I've seen him in this, I'm just like, man, I wish that I would have seen, or I guess I wish I now need the opportunity to watch more Beau Bridges movies. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is it's also, this movie is so under the radar, and I think it falls under the same category as Cold Turkey, where it was just like this style of movie and this level of satire was big a few years earlier. And then, you've got the late 60s and the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Robert Kennedy. And then I feel like between that and just, I guess more of a saturation earlier in the 60s of, this type of satire. And I'm struggling to think of anything beyond Dr. Strangelove.
Sure.
But, and I guess the producers, but I don't feel like the producers, although I guess at the time, pretty subversive to take Nazis and Hitler
but to the same effect, there's also Blazing Saddles.
Well, right, and that's I
that's like the next phase. You think?
Yes, I think Blazing Saddles is a few years later when it's like, all right, we need to laugh at this shit, and like we couldn't. It's almost, I was gonna say, it's like, no, too soon, The Landlord, too soon, but also way ahead of your way
ahead of
your time.
Yeah, and it's a real treat to watch. And even the moments where you kind of cringe a little bit, you're cringing not for the protagonist, you're cringing for the people who it's showcasing their, I guess, immorality and their ignorance. Specifically when we're at the scene where Elgar's family is at this party where everybody has to dress up as like a dead historical person. Is that what it was? Somebody of historical significance. And and Peter was Bojangles.
Is that yes? Yeah.
And Susan was Shirley Temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
of course he's in blackface.
Total blackface.
But the thing is, like, we've already established this character as, a dunce.
He's so dopey.
He's a dullard, and Elgar's family as being racist, so they wouldn't be processing that all. Elgar doesn't really give the best response to it, but also Lainey is with him, and she laughs at it also. So it's almost like, I don't know, there's something about it where it's making us as an audience feel like a little bit more comfortable with the fact that it's happening in the first place. Not to say that is acceptable, but that the character doing it makes sense in the context of the movie.
Well, they've set the character up so that by the time he does that, you're like, oh God, of course. Yeah. Like, of course, Peter goes in blackface and does not see anything wrong with it. And of course, as in recent years, we've had all of these, this yearbook photo of this politician.
Yeah.
So, it's absurd, but there were actual Peters. There are big Peters out there.
Oh yeah, it's a reflection of reality for sure. And also it helps that Peter is not a significant character. We've talked about him more than we probably should be talking about him, but the fact that he is such kind of a little blip, and he's not even, he's the sister's fiance, and it's kind of perplexing why he and the sister are together, but whatever. It's kind of, I guess, like the parents' wishes because he's from an acceptable family.
And she's so much smarter than him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she's totally cool.
Yeah.
And I think that it actually is great to show the difference between, his sister Susan, who is with, somebody who's from the right family, and then shows up to a party in blackface. And then there's Elgar, who is, like we've said, and what an interesting term for it that's so appropriate, with the black sheep of the family. And he brings his girlfriend, who is, she's mixed race, but she identifies as black. Like, that's how she presents. And that's how he, recognizes her when he's talking about her to his family. And it's a great juxtaposition that they show there. We have to stop talking about Peter, first of all, but we have to talk about the scene with Lee Grant and Pearl Bailey, where Lee Grant, who's, the mom, comes to the building to bring some wallpaper curtains, or it's curtains.
Yeah. And
she ends up spending the whole night with Marge, Pearl Bailey's character.
Yeah.
Getting drunk, eating ham hocks. There were some laugh out loud moments in there. That was a total Lucille Bluth scene.
Yes.
She's
absolutely.
And it makes you like her character, who otherwise you'd be like, this is such a despicable person. But then when you see her letting her guard down and taking off the giant bow in her hair and relaxing and just spending time with Marge and drinking the wine with the ice cubes in it and the carbonated, all that stuff. And then when she wakes up from being passed out and she's leaving, and Marge offers her ham hocks to take home. She's like, oh, let me get you a thing to put some ham hocks in. She's like, oh, no. She opens up her purse. Just put them in here. Just put the raw ham hocks in the purse. It's so funny.
Yes.
That was a laugh out loud moment for me.
And yeah, oh, absolutely, same here. I mean, I had a lot of laugh out loud moments. I had a lot of jaw dropping moments, and just where I'm like, oh, there is no holding back. They are going for it, and I both in like to the comedic end more so, but to the dramatic end as well. The scene when, and I guess we're going into spoiler territory here.
Spoiler alert.
So when Kobe finds out that not only has Fanny, slept with Elgar, but she's also pregnant by Elgar, and Kobe goes after Elgar with an axe.
Yes.
And it is terrifying. And that it's a great moment. Beau Bridges, I think, really, like, I watched it and I was like, yeah, I believe he thinks he's about to die.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, no one's letting him in. He's running away, but then this is something that is so brilliantly done in the film, and it's something I think Hal Ashby especially does, is moments after, and Elgar is the protagonist, and the audience, I think, is meant to sympathize with him. But Kopi, first of all, like, that's his, I mean, they're married, right? Kopi and
Fanny.
Yeah. So you have, like, there was definitely, like, something happened that shouldn't have happened.
Right.
And yes, Kopi's reaction is violent, but then he's taken away in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
And it's so sad.
It's
and
upsetting.
You really feel for him.
Yeah.
In that scene when he's on the stretcher in the ambulance, and he's just kind of babbling, and it really makes a statement, and you realize, like, okay, it's the treatment of the poor and of people of color, and just stigmatizing them in that, violent, crazy, out of control stereotype.
Yeah. And
it's also interesting. The novel is set in Philadelphia, and the only reason the film takes place in New York is it was cheaper to shoot in New York.
Right.
But Philadelphia has a really interesting, I mean, like, what city doesn't have, some sort of interesting, history with race, but Philadelphia was the subject of the W.E.B. Du Bois study. He was kind of, hired to conduct the study on the living conditions of African Americans and why they were the way they were, and that it was this whole system of the labor unions not allowing African Americans to join on the basis that they were unreliable, getting sick, prone to crime. And so therefore, African Americans were kept from getting good jobs and jobs where they were protected by a union, therefore leading to their being underpaid, overworked. They're living in, poor conditions where they're, in ghettos basically, and in tenement buildings, and just, families atop families atop families. So of course illness is going to spread, and then people get sick, they lose their jobs, they have nothing, and then when it comes down to it, sometimes crime happens when it's like, well, you know what, I need to pay the bills, or I need to feed my family, and I've been screwed over. So the lie becomes the truth because of the lie.
Right.
And, I think the movie still has packs the same punch in New York, and especially that Park Slope, I think now even is, has that reputation as a very trendy and
Sure.
upscale neighborhood. That's where you see a lot of actors, like John Turturro.
Yeah.
And it's, so I think it still works, but Philadelphia, and of course the author Kristen Hunter was from Philadelphia, so it just made a lot of sense. And when I read that, I was like, oh wow, I'm like it would make even in so many ways, like there's so much context there for Philadelphia that just it really would take on a different meaning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Just to go back a little bit to the scene that you mentioned where Kopi is going at Elgar with the axe, something that I thought was going to happen that didn't actually happen. At the beginning, you hear Elgar talking to a few different people about how he's got this building, and what he's going to do is he's going to take out these things in the hallway to expose the big skylight. So you have the light from the skylight coming down through the whole building. And what I thought was going to happen was that Kopi was going to, with the axe, like bash out a bunch of the walls, and there would be the light coming from the skylight. And then it's like, this is the fulfillment of what Elgar was expecting to do, but the way that he approached the building and its tenants resulted in his vision happening in a completely different way. But that's not what happened. But I was thinking like, oh, he has an axe, they're going out in the hallway, that's what's going to happen.
The literal destructiveness of that vision. And
exactly.
How the havoc it would wreak on all these lives. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so alternate version, that would happen that way.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
One other scene that I wanted to talk about that was a jaw-dropping scene, not in a, oh my God, this is so funny, and, I can't believe the satire is taken this way, but in a more serious direction is when Elgar is looking for the kid, and I'm blanking on his name, Walter G.
Right.
Played by Douglas Grant. So when he's looking for the kid and he goes to the school, and there's like this room in this school where all of these young black kids are learning karate. And it's a very large tonal shift. And it's very much we as a community need to learn very young to protect ourselves and to keep ourselves safe. And when we first meet that kid, he is doing something as self-preservation and, coming up with ways to like take advantage of a rich white man. He goes into the back of Elgar's car, the very like white convertible. And when Elgar discovers him, he says, give me $2 or I'm basically going to say that you kidnapped me. And it's like his way of taking advantage of a situation and being street smart and to protect himself and to have the upper hand. Yeah. And it makes so much sense when you see those kids in a very serious scene learning karate. And I really loved that. And that's something that you get a lot with Hal Ashby. You get those moments where there's the levity, and then it like is a sharp left turn.
But it's like what I like about it is it's still equivalent in terms of its honesty and its truth. Because again, if you know your history and you know the history, especially of Black movements in urban areas in the 1960s, including the Black Panthers, that was part of their mission, was to teach their community the skills that they needed to be safe in a place where the law didn't support their safety.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, It's a great movie. I'm really glad that we gave ourselves the opportunity to watch it because as a Hal Ashby fan going back a long time, it's one that I've been hearing about, but never have had the opportunity to watch. And also, I feel like the marketing of the movie, at least from everything I saw, maybe like misrepresented what it was gonna like. It seemed like it was maybe more of a romp, and it's very funny, but the way that it was the trailer for it, even the poster design is done, which is, I love the poster for it, but it
Right.
doesn't represent fully what it's all about. It makes it seem like it's more of a sex romp than a social satire.
Right. Well, and it also, although I feel like in some ways it reminds me of another satire of, you know, I don't know if it's 1970 or 1971, The Hospital. Patty Chayefsky
Oh,
wrote that, and Arthur Hiller directed. I forget.
I don't know.
But The Hospital, very funny film and very prophetic about healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very topical these days, especially. But The Landlord with George C. Scott is, you know,
The Landlord with George C. Scott.
not The Landlord, the Hospital with George.
The
C.
Hospital.
Yeah, is I think really, you know, it kind of has that same bite, of course, as, you know, Patty Chayefsky also wrote Network.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it felt like the poster was kind of going for something like that, and not,
which,
right.
if you, I mean, it's going to be all over our stuff anyway, but it's the, you know, the two doorbells that look like breasts and like a giant finger going towards them.
Oh, yeah. So it's definitely right. It's painted more like that, and that is not what you get.
Yeah, no, and I think that it's similar to, like, when you take Harold and Maude, for example. You know, you see this quirky guy who fakes suicides and goes to funerals for fun and stuff, and then you know, he's having these adventures with this woman, and then when she has taken pills to kill herself, to, you know, willingly end her life, because she's like, and this was my plan. I hit 80. That's it for me. And the shift that Harold has is very much like the shift that you see in this movie, when it's like the record scratch moments where it's just like, okay, we've had our fun and now it's time to face the repercussions.
Well, and also, like, when you learn about Maude's history in it, and like those are other moments that just like, but they're not out of place. They those moments belong where they are, and it feels like everything is measured, and everything, it is the moments that your jaw drops or that you cringe are like that, like you should be cringing.
Right.
The dinner, we didn't talk about, you know, the first that dinner. We don't need to go into tremendous detail, and I mean, that's actually something I won't ruin, but one of my I'll bring up one of my you know, less jaw-dropping but favorite parts of this, and it was something just subtle, but the way that they say William Jr. every time they refer to Elgar's brother, who's, you know, the prodigal son with the wife who's, you know, she fits the role perfectly. But yes, William Jr. Oh, well, William Jr. and William Jr. And it was, I laughed out loud at. I just thought that was so funny.
It's so well done.
Loved it. And, you know, just like the character of William Jr., and which he's so friggin' bland.
Oh yeah, there's nothing interesting about him at all.
And it's so perfect though, because you're like, yes, this guy is supposed to, yes, we are supposed to get the idea that this, like, you know, these dullards, these just kind of like blank pieces of paper who can, you know, be yes men and can do what they need to do to just kind of like, you know, maintain the family fortune. that's all that's expected of them. And then, yeah, when you're that's why you've got the younger kids here. Susan kind of does as she pleases.
Right.
And
yeah, well, she's marrying wealthy, and that's what she's set to do. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's fulfilling the
Yeah.
prophecy set out by her family, and she, even though she aligns more with Elgar personality-wise,
Mhm.
it seems like she's like, well, I guess I'm just kind of stuck with this, but I love that you're doing what you're doing, and I wish I could do that too. That's kind of the vibe I get from her.
And, hey, John, something I noticed is something I know is one of your favorite things to point out in films.
Oh, what was it?
The reference to a recent movie.
Right. What was it?
Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Oh, that's right. They did say, yeah, right. Lee Grant says, we went to see Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Yeah. When did that come out?
67.
Oh yeah, so that's so funny.
Yeah. Oh, when
he tells them that he's dating Lainey, who is black, that's the reaction,
right?
Like, wasn't that enough that we went to go see that movie?
But you know what, John? How many people do you think actually got that response?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm wondering, at that time, if you came home and you're like, oh, I'm in a interracial relationship.
Yeah.
How many of the parents, and I'm not just like wealthy, out of touch Hal Ashby movie characters, but like a lot of Americans. I mean, like how many of them. That's kind of the badge of honor. That's the thing that like kind of it alleviates some of that guilt there. It's like, oh, I saw that. I appreciated that. I enjoyed it, and I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
So yes, when it's what's her name? The actress who's in it, and she's in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and Catherine Ross. Catherine Ross, yes. I was like, it's Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, Sidney Poitier, and Catherine Ross. Yes, I knew it was like four legends.
But since, and we had talked about this on a recent episode, but since you and I grew up in Cranford, New Jersey, the equivalent would be, but we went to see Guess Who in the theater together.
Yes.
Filmed in Cranford, New Jersey, where we're from, starring Ashton Kutcher, Zoe Saldana. Anyway.
We identified with Bernie Mac and Ashton Kutcher. And Zoe Saldana. And yeah.
Well, Dan, speaking of remakes, what would you do with The Landlord?
Well, I don't think I would remake it. And there's certainly some temptation there. And there are certainly ways that this could work. It could work as a play. It could be adapted to work as a play, but I don't know. It feels like such a product of its time. I would love to attend a screening with a Q&A with Beau Bridges.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. That sounds great.
Like, what? I would love like that. That would be great. So that, a nice Blu-ray release.
Yeah.
Something, like it's one of those movies that, for the reasons we talked about earlier, it didn't do so well, but also like Cold Turkey, it deserves to be looked at again, and it deserves to be considered, and in that conversation with the Blazing Saddles, and I'm gonna get you, sucker. Like you said, the black films, and I'm guessing that the hosts of the podcast you mentioned before are more qualified than you and I
Yeah,
to
and I'm gonna put a link
determine that.
to listen to their episode in The Landlord, as they will give a different interpretation of the film and their views on it.
And
That'll be in this podcast's episode description, by the way.
awesome. And before I forget, it made me think of, and I haven't watched this movie since renting it on VHS, probably I'm guessing 1993, but The Super with Joe Pesci.
Forgot about that one.
I'm like, I feel like that was a similar gimmick, but also maybe it was more satirical. Like maybe it was kind of smarter than I was able to recognize when I saw it because I didn't know anything.
Karma comes into play when a wealthy, wisecracking landlord is ordered by court to live in the filthy building that he runs.
But I think then what happens is he starts to...
Oh, of course he does.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen it, but I can tell you that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly, but I'll have to keep an eye out for that one, see if it's streaming, check it out. I don't remember thinking it was very good.
You know what? That one was written by Sam Simon, who was very prolific with The Simpsons and Tracy Ullman Show. Directed by Rod Daniel, who did
Beethoven?
K9, Teen Wolf, Beethoven's Second.
Oh, Beethoven's Second. Okay.
Yeah. He may have done Beethoven's First, aka Beethoven, but that's what's coming up on his IMDb top 4.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rod Daniel, Teen Wolf. Right. So,
I guess I never even thought about somebody directing Teen Wolf. It just seems like that movie just happened.
Just
like
directed
it was just
itself.
presented. It just was presented to us, and it was just like fully formed.
Teen Wolf just kind of happened. It was the
Yeah.
80s and Michael J. Fox and, anything was possible.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, John, what is your ideal way to revisit The Landlord?
I think that I wouldn't mind seeing a remake, especially since we are living in a world where like everywhere has been gentrified. There isn't a single square mile of land that hasn't been touched in some way by gentrification, which is so upsetting. And maybe it is about like the last neighborhood yet to be gentrified and the like wealthy, son of like the, wealthy people who decides to be the first to infiltrate the neighborhood. And I think that's the only way that it could work, is if it's just like the last neighborhood in the entire country to not be touched by gentrification.
And it feels, I'm like, as soon as you started saying that, and like, I was like, yeah, it's got to be that. And what if the tenants get together and they're like, we all know what's going to happen, all right? And look, if we know we need to charm this guy. We need to win him over. So it's kind of like almost not necessarily saying like we've all seen this movie.
Yeah.
but
right.
But also like embracing the the conventions of the genre.
Yeah, and also, I mean, yes, I would want it to be handled by a black creative crew, writers, directors, anybody who has creative input basically. And I don't know, like there's so many great actors. When I was watching The Landlord, I was just like, who would the present day version of like Beau Bridges be? And the one person I thought who could actually pull it off, and I know you're gonna appreciate this, is Skylar Gisondo.
Oh,
Gisondo.
Yes.
Because he has that like fresh faced, innocent guy that could be like come across as wealthy, but also open-minded and progressive and well-meaning, but well-intentioned but poorly thought out kind of a person. So,
right.
Everybody else who I was thinking of, I was like, no, they'd be too old. It's like everybody was just kind of aged out of it, but I was just like, oh, that's the person who's like in that sweet spot.
Yeah. I can't think of anyone better. It's like if you did this maybe like 25 years ago, like John C. Reilly.
Oh, 25 years ago. I don't know. I
30,
feel like John C. Reilly
40 years ago.
40 years ago. I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't know if I could see John C. Reilly really doing this. I'm thinking like Boogie Nights era John C. Reilly. He's still I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe maybe that's a bit off there. But Michael J. Fox would have at a certain point would have been
right. Yeah. In the Doc Hollywood era could have done this role.
Yeah. So that would have been
Secret of My Success. Yeah,
that would have been the right. Yeah,
that might be our S movie, Dan.
Oh wow! There's a whole lot in there.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So before we talk about what we're going to cover on our next episode, our M episode, I want to thank everybody for listening, and for anybody who hasn't yet, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review, rate us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. That goes a long way. If you're watching us on YouTube or Spotify, thank you so much. Leave a comment. We really appreciate all the comments that we get on YouTube. And we don't get very many on Spotify, but we love to see them come in. Email us, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com if you have ideas on how you would want to bring back The Landlord or any movie that we have already talked about. Again, we are doing a year-long series that is movies from A to Z, then Z to A. We're trying to be as alliterative as possible, or if we can, really sticking with that first letter as much as possible. And so if you have movies that you really want us to cover as we continue on up the alphabet and then again back down, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com. Dan, what are we doing for our M episode?
Well, for our M episode, we're going way back. We're going to 1931 to Germany for the Fritz Lang classic M, because if we can do a movie that's just the letter, why not? So here we are at M. We're doing M. So written, directed by Fritz Lang, also co-written by Thea von Harbu, and starring Peter Lorre.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Dan, I am really excited to talk about M. Really wild movie. Have you seen it before?
I may have seen it in high school in film as an art form. Right. I at least saw clips of it. Like, there are certain images that just kind of stand out in my mind. Yeah. But no, I'm really excited to watch it, and it'll feel like the first time.
Cool. Well, Dan, as you are driving up to your new building with giant potted pink flowers, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.